It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world outside is fading into the soft hum of night. The rain was tapping against the windows, a gentle rhythm that should have felt comforting. But inside it was a storm. My heart felt like it was breaking piece by piece with every word she said. I had spent so many years trying to give her everything. I sacrificed my time, my energy, my dreams, everything that was mine, just so she could have the best. I thought that was what motherhood was about, giving without expecting anything in return. But that night, my daughter looked at me with a coldness I couldn't understand. "The best gift you could give me," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife, "is if you just died." I stood there frozen. The words echoed in my head, repeating over and over. How did it come to this? How did I, the person who had always been there for her, become the source of such pain for my own child? Her words pierced deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the anger in her voice that hurt the most. It was the complete indifference. I had poured my life into this, thinking that the love I gave would be enough. But now I realized it wasn't. I was devastated, torn between wanting to hold her close and feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It felt like everything I had worked for, everything I had given, had turned to dust. And that night I made a decision. I canceled the funding. I always thought I knew what family was supposed to be like. You know, the picture-perfect idea where everyone loves each other unconditionally, where you sacrifice for the people you care about without even thinking twice. I imagined that no matter what happened, I would always have my daughter by my side, and she would always have me. It was simple in my mind. A mother's love is enough. I believed that deeply. I met her father when I was young, and we were both full of hope and ambition. Felt like we had the whole world at our feet. I can still remember the first time I saw him. He had this calm, easygoing smile that made everything feel right. It wasn't long before we were married and started building a life together. We wanted a family. We dreamed of raising a child in a home filled with love, laughter, and security. We thought that all it took was giving her the best of everything. And for years, that's what we did. When our daughter was born, it felt like the universe had aligned. She was everything we had hoped for. As she grew, we showered her with affection, taking every step possible to make sure she had a life better than ours. I worked long hours, sometimes doing jobs I didn't love, but it was for her future. Her father did the same. We wanted to provide her with every opportunity. Private schools, the best tutors, trips to places we could never have imagined going when we were young. All of it for her. We told ourselves that our sacrifices were worth it, that one day, she would look back and appreciate what we did for her. But as she grew older, something began to shift. It was subtle at first, easy to ignore. She started becoming more independent and more distant. And I told myself it was just part of growing up. I remember those moments when she would close herself off in her room, or when she wouldn't want to talk about her day at school. I thought, it's just the teenage years. It will pass. But it didn't. The love I thought would always be there, unwavering and strong, started feeling different. It was like a shadow always hanging there, but it wasn't warm anymore. I thought I could hold on, give her more space, and try harder to understand what she was going through. But the gap between us kept widening. One evening, I walked into her room to find her scrolling through her phone, her eyes not meeting mine. There was a coolness in the air, a kind of distance I couldn't explain. She used to come to me with everything, her worries, her dreams, and her hopes. But now she barely spoke. It wasn't that I hadn't tried. I asked her how her day was, what she was feeling, and what she wanted for her future. But every time it was met with a shrug or a short answer. There was a time when I could read her like a book. Now she was a mystery to me, and it hurt more than I ever could have imagined. I wasn't sure when it started, but I could feel it. This wall between us growing taller with each passing day. And all I could do was watch it rise. Things became even more complicated when I started noticing the way she interacted with others. It was like she had a side to her that I didn't recognize anymore. I'd hear snippets of conversations, little remarks from friends and family, that made me wonder if she was changing in ways I couldn't keep up with. She was becoming more independent, yes, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I tried to be the understanding mom, the one who didn't judge, the one who kept an open door and an open heart. But the truth was I was scared. I could see her pulling away from me in ways that I didn't understand, and I didn't know how to fix it. It was like I was losing her slowly, and I didn't know what to do to stop it. We had always been a family that sat down for dinner together every evening, no matter how busy the day was. It was our time to connect, to check in with each other, and to share what was on our minds. But recently, dinner has become an uncomfortable affair. She would barely look up from her phone, or she'd be lost in thought, barely saying a word. It was like she was a stranger sitting across from me at the table, someone I didn't know. Her father noticed it too. We both did, but neither of us knew how to address it. The conversations we tried to have with her were met with dismissals or silence. I remember asking her, "Are you okay? You've seemed a bit distant lately." She just shrugged, her face expressionless. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said, her voice flat. But there was no warmth in it. No life. I thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe if I gave her more time, she'd come back to me. That eventually we'd find our way back to the closeness we once shared. I wasn't prepared for the realization that it might not be a phase at all. It wasn't just the silence or the distance. It was the way she began to talk to me like I was an outsider in her life. She started questioning everything I did. My decisions, my choices, and my love for her. And while I was struggling to understand her, to find a way to bridge the gap, it felt like she was pushing me further and further away. There was a sense of betrayal too. I gave her everything, every part of me. Yet, instead of gratitude, instead of love, I felt coldness in return. It was like my efforts, my sacrifices had become invisible. I couldn't help but wonder if she even cared anymore. I remember the moment I realized I couldn't do it alone anymore. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering when things had changed. I kept asking myself, what happened to us? And every time I thought I had an answer, it slipped away like water through my fingers. I wasn't prepared for what was coming next. The day it all came to a head, I didn't see it coming. I thought I was prepared, but the truth is, no one is ever really prepared for that kind of heartbreak. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the world outside feels heavy with the promise of something more. Something you can't quite name but know is coming. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner when she walked into the living room, her eyes downcast. I could feel that there was something off in the air. I tried to make small talk like I always did. "How was school today?" I asked, my voice soft. I was trying as always to reach her. But instead of the usual, "Fine, Mom," she turned to face me, her expression harder than I had ever seen it. "Don't pretend you care," she said flatly, her words sharp, and for a moment I was taken aback. My heart skipped, but I tried not to show it. "Of course I care. I'm your mom. I'll always care about you." She gave a dry laugh. "You don't care. You're just trying to act like you do. Everything you do is for your image, for how you look to other people." The words stung, but I held my ground, refusing to show her the hurt that was already growing inside me. "That's not true. Everything I've done for you. For your future." She scoffed, walking toward the couch. "Yeah, well, I don't need it. I don't want any of it. You think I care about all the money you've thrown at me? The trips, the tutors, the fancy schools? It's all just for you, not for me." I could feel my chest tightening. The weight of everything I had done, the sacrifices, the long nights, the endless hours at work, came crashing down on me. Was this all it amounted to? Was this what she really thought of me? "I just want you to be happy," I whispered, my voice breaking. She didn't look at me. "I'd be happier if you just died." The words hit me like a slap, cold and unexpected. I froze, not knowing how to respond, not knowing how to fix something that was so broken. In that moment, I realized that everything I had done, every ounce of effort I had put into raising her, hadn't been enough. And maybe it never would be. She didn't see the pain in my eyes. She didn't see the way my heart shattered with each word she said. She didn't see the years of love and care that had gone unnoticed. All she saw was her frustration, her anger at the world she felt trapped in, and I was the easy target. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her and make her understand. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away, my mind racing. It felt like everything I had built for her, everything I had hoped for, had crumbled in an instant. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew that there was more at play here than just this one moment. I didn't speak to her for the rest of the evening. I couldn't. The silence between us was unbearable. I kept thinking about what she said, replaying it over and over. I wondered how long she had been feeling this way, how long she had been carrying this weight, this resentment. But in the deepest part of me, I also knew that something had to change. For her. For me. And maybe, just maybe, for us. The next day I made a decision. I canceled the funding. All of it. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. But in that moment, I knew it was the only thing I could do to give her space. To let her understand that love and support shouldn't be taken for granted. It was my way of pulling back, of hoping she would see the reality of things, the consequences of her words. And yet, even as I made the call to cancel everything, a part of me wondered if this was the end. If this was where our story took a turn, one I couldn't turn back from. In the days following my decision, I could feel the shift between us. It wasn't just the absence of the funding, although that was a heavy decision. It was the way everything felt like it was being seen through a different lens. The warmth in our home, which had once been so steady and reliable, felt distant now. Even the air between us seemed colder. She barely spoke to me. The conversations, if you could call them that, became strained and awkward. At times, she would look right through me as if I wasn't even there. It wasn't the angry silence you'd expect after an argument. No, this was a different kind of silence, the kind that made you question if the connection you thought you had was ever really there. I could feel her frustration growing, and yet I wasn't sure how to address it. The words we shared felt more like a way to fill the void rather than connect. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, a moment of rebellion. But with each passing day, the weight of it all began to sink deeper. Was it just a phase? Or was this the beginning of something far worse? One evening, I asked her if she wanted to talk. I'm here, you know. If you want to say something, anything at all, I'll listen. She didn't look at me. Instead, she continued scrolling on her phone, her eyes fixed on the screen, the faint hum of the device filling the room. No, I'm good, she replied, her voice flat. The words felt empty, like she had already checked out, like she had no space left for me in her world. And maybe that was the hardest part, the realization that I had no way to reach her anymore. I tried to give her the space she seemed to want, but I couldn't help but feel rejected. I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her more and more every day. Every attempt I made to bridge the gap seemed to push her further away, and I felt helpless in the face of it all. Then one day, I came home from work to find her packing a bag. Where are you going? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. She didn't look up, her focus solely on the task at hand. Out with some friends. I tried to keep my voice steady, trying to hide the pain I was feeling. You didn't mention anything about going out today. She paused for a moment, then shrugged. I don't have to tell you everything. Her words stung, and I could feel the walls closing in. What was happening to us? Was this what it had all led to? I'm your mom, I said softly, trying to keep the emotion from breaking through. I care about you. I want to know where you are. Please don't shut me out. She didn't say anything for a long while, and when she did, it was just another shrug, followed by a quiet, I'm fine. I watched her leave, the door closing softly behind her, and in that silence, I felt a hollow emptiness in my chest. She wasn't the same girl who used to run into my arms for comfort or sit with me for hours talking about life. I didn't know who she had become, but it was clear she was no longer the daughter I had raised. And worse yet, I wasn't sure if I could ever get her back. The days that followed were filled with a constant undercurrent of tension. I found myself waiting for something, anything that might bring us back together. But as time went on, I realized that maybe I had been hoping for the wrong things. Maybe what I thought was a temporary distance had become something much deeper, something more permanent. She would come home late, sometimes not even saying hello when she walked through the door. When I would ask her about her day, she would respond with vague answers, her tone barely above a whisper. It was as if she was speaking to a stranger, not someone who had been there for her through every high and low. I knew I couldn't keep pushing her. I had to give her the space she clearly wanted. But what did it mean for us? Was this how she wanted things to be? Was this what I had built for her? A life where she felt like I was more of a burden than a mother? One afternoon, I came across an old letter she had written when she was younger. It was filled with sweet words, an innocent love for a mother who had always been there. I had kept it in a drawer, tucked away like a treasure, something to remind me of the bond we once shared. As I read the letter again, the contrast between that little girl and the young woman in front of me was almost unbearable. Where had that love gone? I tried to talk to her again. This time, I didn't approach her with the hope of fixing everything. I just wanted to understand. Can we talk? I asked one evening when she was sitting at the kitchen table, absorbed in her phone. About what? She asked without looking up, her voice distant. About you, about us, I said softly. About what's going on. I just want to understand why you're so distant. I'm your mother. I love you. I'm here for you. For a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. And then finally she looked up, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. I don't need your help, she said, her voice almost too calm. I can handle things on my own. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't asking to fix everything. I wasn't trying to take over her life. I just wanted her to let me in, to see that I still cared, that I was still the same mother I had always been. But she didn't want that. She didn't want me in her life the way I thought she did. And that realization was like a punch in the stomach. I had spent years building a life around her, investing everything into making sure she had the best of everything, thinking that one day she would look at me and see the love I had given her. But now it seemed like it had all been in vain. I could feel the tears welling up, but I pushed them back. I wasn't going to cry in front of her, not this time. I had to be strong. But as she turned away, returning her attention to her phone, I couldn't help but feel like I had lost her in a way I would never be able to get back. Days passed, and I tried to pretend that everything was okay, but I knew deep down that it wasn't. Each time I saw her, I felt a growing distance between us, like we were living in two separate worlds that no longer intersected. I wanted to talk to bridge the gap, but every time I tried, it felt like I was just hitting a wall. One night, after another long day at work, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, her head buried in her phone. It had become routine. She was always glued to that screen, as if it was her escape from everything else. I watched her for a moment, wondering how we had ended up like this. I took a deep breath and sat down beside her. Can we please talk? I asked quietly, my voice almost pleading. She didn't respond right away and just kept scrolling. I waited and finally she looked up, her face unreadable. What is it now? She asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. I just want to understand, I said softly. You've been shutting me out. I know something's wrong. I'm your mom and I want to help, but I can't help if you won't let me in. Her expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought she might finally say something meaningful, something that would break the silence between us. But instead she stood up abruptly, walking toward the door. I'm fine, she said, her voice cold. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone. The words stung sharper than I had imagined. I watched her leave, and this time I didn't chase after her. I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. How did it come to this? How did the child who once clung to me, who once trusted me with everything, become this person, this stranger who didn't want to be a part of my life? I couldn't understand what had happened. I tried to think back to the moments when things had started to shift, but it all seemed so gradual, so subtle, like the slow erosion of a relationship that I had worked so hard to build. The next morning, I woke up to find her gone again. She had left a note on the kitchen counter. It was brief and cold, just a few words that made my heart sink even further. Don't try to reach out to me anymore. I'm fine on my own. I stared at the note, the words echoing in my mind. Was this really happening? Was this what my life had become? I had given everything for her. Everything. And now she was telling me she didn't need me, that she was better off without me. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. A deep, aching betrayal that cut through me in ways I didn't know how to handle. She was my daughter. I had spent my life giving her everything I could, and this was how she saw me? As someone expendable? I couldn't stop thinking about the words she had said to me that night. The words I would never forget. The best gift you could give me is if you just died. Those words kept replaying in my mind, and each time they did, it felt like a fresh wound, one that wouldn't heal. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know what. And that uncertainty, being in a place where I didn't know how to fix things, was the hardest part. It wasn't long before the tension between us became unbearable. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, that she was just going through a phase. Each day without a meaningful conversation, each night with the door closed between us, made it harder and harder to ignore the growing divide. I felt the weight of my decision pressing on me. Canceling the funding seemed so final, so harsh. But did it really make a difference? Was it going to make her understand? Or was it just pushing her further away? I began to question my own actions, wondering if I had done the right thing. Maybe I had been too harsh, too quick to act out of hurt. I was trying to teach her a lesson, but now it felt like I was the one who had learned nothing. What had I hoped to accomplish by cutting off the support she had come to rely on? The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a failure on my part. I had thought that withholding the financial support would make her see how much I cared, how much I had sacrificed. But instead, it felt like I had pushed her further into a world where I no longer belonged. I had become the enemy, the source of her frustration, the one person who couldn't understand her. I remember the day it all reached its breaking point. I had just come home from work, exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The house felt empty, colder than it ever had. I went into the kitchen, thinking I might be able to find some peace in a cup of tea, but instead I found a letter waiting for me on the counter. It wasn't from her. This time it was a letter from her school. They had sent a note about an upcoming meeting, and as I read through the details, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread in my stomach. There were issues with her grades, her attendance, and her overall well-being. I had noticed the change in her behavior, but seeing it laid out in black and white made it feel real. I dialed the number on the letter, my hands shaking as I pressed the buttons. When the receptionist answered, I asked about the meeting and whether there was anything serious to be concerned about. "It's just a routine check-in," she said, but the way she hesitated made me wonder if there was more beneath the surface. That night, I tried to approach her again. This time, I didn't mention the funding. I didn't bring up the school letter. I just wanted to connect, to find some way back to the girl I once knew. "Can we talk?" I asked quietly, standing in the doorway of her room. She didn't look up from her phone. "About what?" she asked, her voice still flat. "Anything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to understand." She sighed, a deep, almost exasperated sigh. "I'm tired, okay? I'm tired of all this." I felt my heart tighten at the words. "What do you mean? All this?" She turned her head slowly, her eyes tired but still filled with something I couldn't name. "I'm tired of pretending. Tired of you trying to control everything. I don't need you to fix me. I don't need anything from you." Her words hit me hard. They cut deeper than I had imagined. But the most painful part wasn't just what she said. It was the resignation in her voice, the finality. "I'm not trying to fix you," I said, struggling to keep the tears in check. "I just want to be here for you. I just want to help you find your way. I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm just asking you to let me in." She didn't answer, just turned back to her phone, her back to me once again. I felt like a stranger in my own home, in my own family. And in that silence, I realized how deep the wound had gone, how far we had drifted from each other. The silence between us continued to stretch, thick and suffocating. I tried to reach out in small ways, but nothing seemed to work. Every effort I made, every attempt to bridge the gap, was met with cold indifference. It was like she had already made up her mind that I wasn't a part of her life anymore. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to fully give up. She was my daughter. She was the person I had loved since the moment she was born, the person who had once looked up to me with trust in her eyes. I couldn't let go of that so easily, no matter how much she pushed me away. I started to notice more small signs, the late nights out, the increasing distance from her friends and family, and the way she had become closed off and unreachable. It was like she was living in a world that had no space for me, and I was on the outside knocking, hoping to be let in. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space across from me. I thought back to the days when we would talk for hours, when she would tell me everything, and I would listen with all my heart. But now, even though she was in the house, it felt like she was miles away. The pain of it was almost unbearable. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. Where had I gone wrong? Was it the decision to cancel the funding? Was it something deeper, something I hadn't noticed? Had I failed her as a mother? It was around this time that I started seeing the signs of just how much her anger had grown. I wasn't blind to the fact that she was struggling, but in her eyes, it seemed like I had become a symbol of everything she hated about her life. I wasn't the mom who made things better anymore. I wasn't the one who could fix things. I still remember the day she came home late, slamming the door behind her. She was clearly upset about something, her face flushed, her body tense with anger. I didn't know what had happened, but I could see that she was about to explode. "Where have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't answer right away, standing in the hallway as if deciding whether or not to speak. "None of your business," she finally muttered, her tone sharp and defensive. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, but this time I wasn't going to back down. "I'm your mother. It is my business. I'm trying to help you, but you're not letting me in." Her eyes blazed with frustration. "I don't need your help. I don't need you telling me what to do. You don't understand anything." The words hurt more than I wanted to admit. I tried to push through the hurt and tried to hold on to the belief that I was doing the right thing. But as she stormed off to her room, leaving me standing there, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something we couldn't come back from. The door slammed shut behind her, and I felt a weight settle in my chest. I wasn't sure how much longer I could carry this burden, not knowing how to reach her, not knowing how to make her see that I was doing all of this because I loved her. And as I stood there, with the silence closing in on me once again, I knew one thing for sure. Something had broken between us, and I wasn't sure it could ever be fixed. The weeks seemed to stretch endlessly. The tension in our home became a constant companion, an unspoken weight that hung in the air. I tried to keep the facade of normalcy intact, but I knew deep down that it was only a matter of time before something had to give. The space between us, both physical and emotional, was growing larger with each passing day, and it felt like we were both drifting further apart with no clear way to bridge the gap. The phone calls, the unanswered texts, the doors being slammed in my face. Everything seemed to be a sign of how far gone we were. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, that she would come around, but deep inside, I knew I was holding on to a hope that was slipping further away with each day. It was a Sunday morning when the change first began. I woke up early, the house still quiet except for the distant hum of the coffee machine in the kitchen. As I made my way down the stairs, I noticed her sitting at the dining table. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't lost in some world of her own. She was just sitting there, staring at the cup of coffee in front of her. It was the first time in weeks that we had shared the same space without the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. I paused at the doorway, unsure of what to do. Should I say something? Should I let her speak first? Finally, I decided to approach her slowly and quietly, as if testing the waters. "Good morning," I said softly, my voice tentative, unsure if it would be met with the same coldness as before. She didn't look up at first, but after a long pause she whispered, "Morning." It was simple, just a word, but it felt like a small victory. I took a seat across from her, not saying anything, just allowing the silence to settle between us. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I needed to say, but at that moment I wasn't sure if it was the right time. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me harder than I expected. For weeks I had been trying to get her to open up, to hear me, and now here she was apologizing without even looking at me. I could feel the lump in my throat grow, but I held it together. "Sorry for what?" I asked gently, not wanting to make her feel pressured, but needing to understand. She looked up at me, her eyes tired and filled with something I couldn't quite read. "For everything. For pushing you away. For saying those things." I didn't know what to say. I had been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't stopped to think about what she might be going through. The weight of my own actions, my decisions, had clouded my ability to truly see her for who she was. A confused, angry young woman who was struggling in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. "Why did you say those things?" I asked quietly, my voice breaking with emotion. "Why did you say you wished I was dead?" She looked away, her gaze falling to her hands, which were now trembling slightly. "I didn't mean it. I was just so angry. I didn't know how to say what I was feeling. I didn't know how to make you understand." It felt like a revelation, like a flood of emotions that had been building up for months, maybe even years, had finally been given a voice. I realized then that everything she had been doing, everything she had said, was a way of pushing me away because she didn't know how to ask for what she really needed. I reached out, placing my hand gently on hers. "I'm sorry too," I said softly, my voice filled with regret. "I didn't see how much pain you were in. I thought I was helping, but I was only making it worse." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with tears. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to disappoint you. And in that moment something shifted. I understood. I saw her. For the first time in weeks I saw my daughter. The girl who had once been so full of light, of laughter, of hope. She wasn't the angry, distant person she had become. She was someone who had been struggling to find her place. Someone who had been so scared of disappointing me that she had pushed me away entirely. I didn't know how to fix everything, but I knew this was the beginning. This was the moment that would change everything for us. For the first time in what felt like forever, the walls between us began to crumble. Her apology, though quiet and hesitant, was like the first crack in the thick ice that had built up between us. It wasn't everything. I knew there was still so much unspoken, so much left unresolved, but it was a start. The beginning of something I hadn't thought was possible anymore. After that morning we began to talk more. Slowly, carefully, as if we were both afraid of disturbing the fragile peace we had found. We spoke about the things that had been bothering her, things that I had never fully understood. Her feelings of inadequacy, the pressure she felt to live up to expectations, my expectations. She told me how she had started feeling like she wasn't enough, like no matter what she did, it was never going to be good enough for me. And I in turn shared my own struggles. How I had spent so much of my life giving everything to her, trying to provide for her in every way I could, but feeling like I had failed her in the end. I listened more than I spoke. I had to. For once I had to stop trying to fix everything and just be there. To hear her, to understand her. One night, as we sat on the couch together, she turned to me with an almost childlike vulnerability in her eyes. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "do you still love me?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment I couldn't answer. But then the answer came to me, clear and unwavering. "Of course I love you. I love you more than anything." She looked away, her hands nervously twisting the edge of her shirt. "I don't want you to be disappointed in me. I want to make you proud, but I don't know how. I don't know what you expect from me anymore." I could see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, the fear. She had been carrying this weight alone for so long, and I had been too blind to see it. My heart broke as I realized just how much she had been struggling. She had been trying to live up to an image I had created in my mind, one that she could never truly fit into. "You don't have to make me proud," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You just have to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine as if trying to find the truth in my words. I could see the skepticism in her expression, the hesitation, but I knew that this was a turning point. The bridge wasn't fully built yet, but we were standing on the edge of it. "I just want you to know that I've always been proud of you," I continued, my voice cracking with emotion. "Even when things were hard, even when we didn't see eye to eye, I've always been proud of you. And I'm sorry for not telling you that enough." She nodded, her face softening, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I saw a glimmer of the daughter I had known, the one who trusted me, the one who believed in our bond. It wasn't gone, not entirely. It was just buried beneath the weight of misunderstandings, of unmet expectations, of unspoken pain. But now we are starting to dig through it together. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered, her voice small but filled with relief. "I'm sorry too. I didn't know how to say it, but I was angry, and I didn't know how to make it stop." And for a moment, everything felt a little bit lighter. The heavy weight that had been pressing down on us both was still there, but it was beginning to lift. Slowly, piece by piece, we were rebuilding. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but we were taking the first steps toward healing, toward finding our way back to each other. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: we weren't done yet. As the days went on, things began to shift between us. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but it was a change nonetheless. We started talking more openly, not just about the things that had driven us apart, but about the things that made us who we were. Our fears, our hopes, and our regrets. It was like we were learning to communicate all over again, but this time it felt more honest, more real. I still remembered the way she had looked at me that day, when she asked if I still loved her. It was the kind of look that makes your heart ache, because you realize just how deeply someone can feel, even when they're trying to hide it. I had seen her pushing me away for so long, but in that moment I saw the fear behind it. She wasn't angry at me, not really. She was angry at herself. Angry that she couldn't meet the expectations she thought I had for her. Angry that she couldn't be who she thought I wanted her to be. and I had been blind to it. I had always thought I was giving her everything she needed. I thought providing for her financially and setting her up with every opportunity was enough. But it wasn't. It never was. She needed more than just material things. She needed me, really needed me. Not just as a provider, but as a listener. As someone who understood her struggles, who acknowledged her feelings. One evening we sat in the living room together, the TV softly playing in the background, but neither of us really paid attention to it. I was making dinner, something simple, but for the first time in a long while we were in the same space, comfortable with just being there together. I was thinking, she said, breaking the silence, about how I've been acting. I stopped chopping vegetables and turned to look at her, waiting for her to continue. There was a sincerity in her voice, something that hadn't been there before. And I was so mad at you for everything. I was mad because I thought you didn't get me, but I think I was just pushing you away because I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't want to disappoint you. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I had been so wrapped up in my own feelings, so consumed by the distance between us, that I hadn't stopped to think about how she felt. She had been dealing with her own confusion and her own struggles, and I had only been seeing the surface of it. I walked over to her and sat down, reaching out to gently take her hand in mine. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "I didn't see how much you were hurting. I didn't see how hard you were trying to live up to something I didn't even realize I was doing." She squeezed my hand, her eyes searching mine, as if she needed reassurance that I truly understood. "I'm not perfect, Mom. I'm still figuring things out, but I want to do better. I want to be someone you're proud of, not just because of the things I do, but because I'm me." I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek without warning. "You're already someone I'm proud of. Just being you is enough. You don't have to be anything else." We sat in silence for a moment, just holding each other's hands, letting the weight of everything we had said settle between us. I didn't know where we were going from here, but for the first time in so long, I felt like we were on the same path, moving forward together, even if it was just a small step at a time. "I love you, you know that, right?" I whispered. She nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, Mom." And in that moment it felt like we were finally starting to heal. The past wasn't erased, but it no longer felt like it was defining us. We were both broken in our own ways, but now we were mending slowly together. The days that followed were a strange mix of progress and lingering uncertainty. We had crossed a line, one that I wasn't sure how to fully navigate, but at least we had acknowledged it. There were moments when we still stumbled. Small misunderstandings, the weight of old emotions creeping back in, but I began to see something different in her eyes. The walls that had been built between us were starting to crumble, piece by piece. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and it made my heart ache. It was like hearing the words I had been waiting to hear for so long, but I had been too afraid to ask for them. I nodded, wiping my hands on the dish towel as I turned to face her. "I've been thinking about everything," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "About how much I've shut you out, and about what I said before." Her voice trailed off, and she looked down at her hands for a moment. "I didn't mean it. I was just so angry at everything, at myself mostly, and I took it out on you." I didn't say anything at first. There was so much I wanted to say, but at that moment I just let her speak. I let her take the lead, and I listened with everything I had. "I know you love me," she continued, "and I know I haven't been easy to deal with. I guess I didn't know how to let you in, how to let anyone in. I was so afraid of disappointing you, of not being who you wanted me to be, that I built this wall around myself." I felt my chest tighten as she spoke. It wasn't just the weight of her words, it was the raw honesty in them. The vulnerability she was offering, the piece of herself she was finally showing after so long. It was like a crack in the facade, a glimpse of the daughter I had been missing. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I never wanted to hurt you." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The lump in my throat was growing again, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was a relief. It was the feeling of something that had been broken finally beginning to heal. "You don't have to apologize," I said softly. "I should have seen how much you were struggling. I should have listened sooner." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and something else. Hope, maybe? I know you did everything for me. I know you tried your best. I just didn't know how to tell you that I was drowning, that I was afraid. I understand now, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You don't have to do this alone, you never have to. I'm always here no matter what. Between us. I love you too, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but the sincerity behind it was unmistakable. And in that quiet, fragile moment, I knew that we were on the path to healing. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to be quick, but it was a start. We had broken the silence. We had taken the first step back toward each other. The days following that conversation felt different. Not dramatically so, but there was a subtle shift, a softening like the first rays of sunlight after a long, stormy night. We still had our moments of tension and still stumbled over old habits, but there was a new sense of awareness between us, a mutual understanding that hadn't been there before. We began to talk more freely, but this time it wasn't forced. It wasn't me trying to fix everything or her shutting me out. We just spoke. About her life, her struggles, my worries, my mistakes. I didn't have all the answers, and neither did she. But we were no longer in opposition. We were allies in the same battle, each learning how to trust again. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table sipping my coffee, she came in quietly, holding something in her hands. It was a letter, folded neatly, but it was clear she had written it herself. She sat down across from me, looking at the letter, then at me. Her eyes were uncertain, almost afraid, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I wanted to give this to you, she said softly. I know I've hurt you and I haven't said enough, but I think it's time. I felt my heart catch in my throat, a mixture of fear and hope flooding through me. I didn't know what was in that letter, but I could feel that this moment was significant. It was a step forward, a deeper level of honesty that we hadn't reached yet. She handed me the letter, and I slowly unfolded it. The words inside were simple, but they hit me in a way I hadn't expected. She spoke of her regrets, her confusion, and how much she had been struggling in silence. But she also spoke of love, how she still loved me, how she still needed me, and how sorry she was for pushing me away. As I read the letter, I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight of everything we had been through, everything we had lost, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back. It was the acknowledgement that we weren't done, that this wasn't the end. There was so much more to our story, and we were finally starting to understand each other again. When I finished reading, I looked up at her, my voice barely a whisper. You don't have to say sorry. I never stopped loving you. I was just lost too. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I know, Mom. I know. And in that moment, everything felt different. We had crossed a line, yes, but it wasn't a line that kept us apart. It was a line that brought us closer. We had hurt each other, we had pushed each other away, but now we were beginning to heal. Not quickly, not perfectly, but slowly, steadily, with each conversation, each moment of vulnerability. We were learning to trust again, to see each other for who we really were, not as the idealized versions we had tried to live up to, but as imperfect, messy, deeply human people who needed each other. It wasn't the end of our journey, but it was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild. A chance to move forward together. And as I looked at her, I realized that, despite everything we had been through, we were still standing side by side. And maybe that was enough. In the days that followed the letter, things didn't magically fix themselves. I wish I could say that there was some instant turnaround, that the tension lifted completely and everything fell into place. But that wasn't the reality. What happened instead was quieter, subtler. A shift that took time and patience, but it was real. We began to work through the difficult conversations, little by little, one moment at a time. Each talk was a step forward, but there were days when we took 2 steps back. I could see the lingering hurt in her eyes, just as I could feel it in my own heart. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it felt like we had finally opened the door to something better. There was no quick fix, but there was hope, a fragile, fragile hope that we were both willing to nurture. We started spending more time together, but this time it wasn't forced. There were moments when we would sit in silence, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt like a chasm between us. It was the kind of silence where we could just be, where the distance didn't feel so vast. It was the kind of silence that gave space for thoughts to settle, for healing to begin. One afternoon we sat together in the living room, not talking much, just being. I was doing some light reading while she worked on her laptop, but the stillness between us felt more peaceful than it had in a long time. I glanced up from my book and saw her fidgeting with the bracelet I had given her for her birthday a few years ago. It was one of those small, tender gestures that reminded me that, despite everything, we were still connected. "I've been thinking about what you said," she finally spoke, breaking the silence. I looked up at her, heart in my throat. "About what?" "About how you said you were always proud of me." I didn't get it at first, but now I think I do. I think I've just been too caught up in trying to meet expectations that I forgot what really matters. She paused for a moment, looking down at the bracelet before meeting my gaze. "It's not about what I do. It's about who I am." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest, the simple yet profound truth of them. I had been so focused on the actions, the results, and the tangible things she had achieved that I had missed the person underneath. My heart swelled with a mix of pride and relief. She was understanding, evolving, and realizing that she didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be herself. And that was enough. "I'm proud of you, not for what you do, but for who you are," I said softly, the words coming naturally, as if I had been waiting my whole life to say them. "You are enough exactly as you are." There was a long pause as she processed what I said. Her face softened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine smile. It wasn't forced or guarded. It was a smile that felt like a weight being lifted. I smiled back, and in that moment, it felt like we were closer than we had been in months. It wasn't perfect, and I knew there were still struggles ahead, but there was a warmth between us that had been missing. We were learning slowly but surely to accept each other again, flaws and all. I realized then that the love we shared wasn't about being flawless. It was about being there for each other through the imperfections. As the days passed, the weight of the past still lingered, but it was starting to feel lighter. The conversations between us, once strained and forced, were now becoming more natural, more fluid. The silence that had once been suffocating, a constant reminder of all that had gone wrong, began to fade. It wasn't that we didn't still have our disagreements, of course we did, but now they felt less like barriers and more like opportunities for us to learn how to communicate better and how to understand each other on a deeper level. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, she turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen in a long time: vulnerability. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice gentle, "about how I've always been enough just as I am." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. I knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation, but I also knew it was necessary. "I've been so hard on myself," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I've spent so much time trying to be someone I'm not, trying to live up to expectations that aren't even real. And I didn't even see how much I was pushing you away, how much I was hurting you in the process." Her words were like a weight lifting off my chest. To hear her acknowledge her own struggles, and to see her taking responsibility for her actions, was a relief. It was the kind of conversation I had been hoping for, but I didn't know how to get there. We had both been so caught up in our own pain, our own hurt, that we hadn't stopped to understand each other. But now it is different. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything. I didn't know how to ask for help." I reached out to her, taking her hand in mine. "I'm sorry too," I said softly. "I should have seen how much you were struggling. I should have known that you needed more than what I was giving you. I've been so focused on providing for you that I forgot to just be here, to listen." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and understanding. "It's not just you," she replied. "I've been so focused on trying to figure things out on my own, thinking I had to do everything myself, that I didn't realize how much I needed you. But now I get it. I don't have to do it alone." And in that moment I realized that this was what we had both been searching for: understanding. We had spent so much time apart, so much time assuming that the other didn't understand, that we had lost sight of the fact that we were both hurting. But now we were finally seeing each other clearly. The distance wasn't gone yet, but it was starting to shrink piece by piece. We sat there for a while, holding hands, letting the quiet settle in between us. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was comforting. I felt like we were starting over, like we were giving ourselves a second chance. "We're going to get through this," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. It's not going to be easy, but we'll get through it. She nodded, her eyes soft. Together. And that was the moment when everything began to shift. I knew there would be hard days ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could face them together. We weren't done yet, we were just beginning to rebuild. As the weeks passed, there was a slow but steady change between us. The cracks that had once felt like chasms were beginning to heal, slowly, cautiously. I had expected the process to be smoother, to somehow just fall into place after that one breakthrough moment, but I quickly realized that healing wasn't as simple as I had hoped. It wasn't a linear process. It came in waves, moments of progress followed by setbacks, but each day felt like a step forward, no matter how small. We started to build new routines, ones that didn't revolve around avoiding the tough conversations or pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. Slowly, we began to talk about the things we had both been too afraid to bring up before. The unspoken resentments, the misunderstandings, and the regrets. At first, it felt awkward, as though we were stumbling through a language we had both forgotten how to speak. But with each word, each conversation, it became clearer that we were both trying, that we were both committed to the effort of healing. One evening after dinner, we sat together on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched a movie. It was such a simple moment, one that I had taken for granted before. But now it felt like a victory. She had let me in, let me back into the small, quiet moments that once defined our relationship. And though we didn't speak much, it felt like the quiet was comfortable, peaceful, even. "I've been thinking," she said, breaking the silence, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I turned my head to look at her, unsure of where this conversation would go. "About what?" "About how much I've missed you. Not just, the things you do for me, but just being with you," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I didn't realize how much I needed you. I didn't realize how much I pushed you away." My heart ached, and I wanted to say something, anything, to reassure her. But I didn't. I simply reached over, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, my hand resting on her cheek. "I'm here," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm always here. I never stopped being here." She closed her eyes for a moment, her breath catching, and then she leaned into me, her head finding its familiar place on my shoulder. It wasn't perfect. We still had our challenges, our moments of frustration and misunderstanding, but in that simple, quiet moment, I knew that we were building something stronger, something more resilient than we had before. "I'm sorry for everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For everything I said, everything I did. I didn't mean it." I squeezed her hand, my voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to apologize anymore. We're moving forward together. That's what matters." We sat in silence for a while, simply being. I wasn't sure how long we stayed there, but at that moment I didn't need to know. What mattered was that we were together, that we were trying, and that, for the first time in a long time, it felt like things were going to be okay. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But as I sat there with her, I realized that, for the first time in a long time, we were finally on the right path. The days grew warmer as spring crept in, and with it came a fresh sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. Every time I looked at her, there was a softness in her eyes, a quiet understanding between us that had once seemed so impossible. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a while I was looking toward it with a sense of peace, not fear. Our relationship was still a work in progress, but we were both putting in the effort. There were moments when the old patterns resurfaced, the silences, the misunderstandings, but they didn't feel as suffocating anymore. Instead, we worked through them, not as adversaries but as two people who were learning how to coexist again, how to understand each other in a way we hadn't before. One weekend, we decided to go for a walk in the park, something we used to do all the time when she was younger. I could tell it was something she had agreed to more out of a desire to reconnect than because she was excited about it. But that was okay. I didn't need her to be thrilled. I just needed her to be present. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of our footsteps crunching against the gravel path the only noise between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled with words. After a few minutes, she spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "I've been thinking about what you said before," she began, "about how it's okay to not be perfect." I nodded, not wanting to interrupt, just letting her share whatever was on her mind. I used to think I had to be perfect, like everything I did had to be just right. And I thought if I made a mistake, or if I didn't live up to expectations, I'd lose you. But now I get it. You're not expecting perfection from me. You just want me to be me. And that's enough. I stopped walking for a moment, looking at her. The words felt like a revelation, a deep understanding that had been missing for so long. You've always been enough, I said softly, my voice filled with sincerity. You don't have to prove anything to me. I've loved you every step of the way, imperfections and all. She looked at me then, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I think I'm starting to believe that, she said, her voice filled with quiet certainty. And in that moment I felt something shift inside me. There was still so much to work through, so many layers of emotion to untangle, but we had reached a place where the foundation was finally solid. We had both come to terms with the fact that we didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to show up for each other every single day. We continued our walk side by side, and this time it was different. There was a sense of ease, of connection, that hadn't been there before. We didn't need to fill the silence with words, because we were both finally comfortable with the space between us. It wasn't just about fixing things. It was about accepting each other, flaws and all, and learning to grow together, not apart. I knew there would be more struggles ahead. No relationship is ever completely free of conflict. But in that moment, as we walked together in the quiet of the park, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had weathered the storm, and now we were learning how to embrace the calm. Time passed, and slowly but surely, things began to fall into place. The days no longer felt like a battle, each one trying to tear us further apart. Instead, they became an opportunity for us to rebuild, to strengthen the bond that had once seemed irreparable. We had our moments, our disagreements, our misunderstandings, but now they felt like temporary bumps in the road, rather than insurmountable obstacles. For so long I had been focused on fixing things, on finding a way to bridge the gap between us. But now I saw that healing wasn't about fixing at all. It was about understanding, accepting, and allowing room for growth, both as individuals and as mother and daughter. I think we're okay now, she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her words weren't about perfection. They weren't about everything being resolved. They were simply about the peace we had found in each other's company. We're more than okay, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. We're still figuring things out, but we're on the right path. And that's enough. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her hand finding mine as we sat there in the fading light. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were exactly where we needed to be. In the days that followed, our conversations became deeper and more open. We no longer tiptoed around the difficult topics. We faced them head-on, with a newfound respect for each other's feelings. I had learned to let go of the expectations that had weighed both of us down, and she had learned to ask for the support she needed instead of pushing me away. We weren't fixed. No one ever is, really. But we were whole again. Our relationship, though scarred, was now a testament to the power of vulnerability, forgiveness, and the willingness to change. We had both done the hard work of opening up, of looking at the things that hurt, and of choosing to move forward together. One day, as I watched her leave for a day out with friends, I realized how far we had come. She was no longer the angry, distant girl I had once seen, and I was no longer the frustrated, misunderstood mother who didn't know how to reach her. We had grown, we had healed, and we had learned to love each other in a way that wasn't about perfection but about acceptance and understanding. And as she turned back to wave at me before heading out the door, I smiled, knowing that, despite everything we had been through, we were stronger now. The road ahead would still have its bumps, but I knew we could handle it. Together. As I look back on everything, it's hard to believe how far we've come. There was a time when I thought we would never find our way back to each other, when it seemed like the distance between us was too wide to bridge. The words, the anger, the pain, it all felt so insurmountable. But now, as I reflect on where we are, I see the power of growth, of understanding, and of love that doesn't demand perfection. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't about one single conversation or one grand gesture. It was about the small, everyday moments where we chose to listen, to be vulnerable, and to face our hurt without running from it. I had to learn to step back and let her find her way, even if it meant letting go of the control I had tried so hard to hold on to. She had to learn to ask for help, to let down the walls she had built so carefully. And in that space, we both began to heal. We began to see each other for who we truly were, imperfect, flawed but still worthy of love, appreciated but loving in a way that's unconditional, even when it doesn't feel returned. It took time, patience, and humility, but in the end it was worth it. We are still figuring things out, still learning, but we are on this path together. And that's enough. That in the end, the greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is the importance of acceptance, not just of others but of myself. I used to think that being a good mother meant being perfect, having everything figured out, and always being the rock my child needed. But the truth is, no one has it all together. We are all just doing the best we can with what we have, and sometimes that means learning as we go. I realized that by trying so hard to protect her from pain, I had overlooked the fact that pain is part of life. It's something we all face, something we all grow through. I wanted to shield her from the struggles I had endured, but in doing so, I unintentionally built a wall between us. A wall that both of us had to tear down. Now, when I look at her, I don't just see the daughter I once knew. I see the person she is becoming, the young woman who is learning to navigate the world in her own way. And I see the strength in her that I didn't always recognize, the courage to face her own emotions and make sense of them. We both have our scars. We both have our mistakes. But we also have each other. And that, to me, is the most important thing. I've learned that love isn't about being flawless. It's about being real, being honest, and being there through it all, the good, the bad, and everything in between. There will always be bumps along the road, but as long as we keep walking it together, I know we'll be okay. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the relationships in your own life. Sometimes we get lost in the noise, caught in misunderstandings and unspoken feelings. But it's never too late to rebuild, to reconnect, and to choose love over distance.